right? So that's the idea with SSRIs is that you could have serotonin stay longer in that synapse so it can have a longer effect. But we didn't know what serotonin did. Moderator, it's on your heart. You lead the way.
All right. Well, welcome to this week's episode of Biotech Talks. We have none other than Rourke, founder, CEO of IMI. IMI is Integrated Molecular Innovations. That's a biotech startup that we are all working on. We have Ali Dabas. He is the Chief Technology Officer. He manages our social media. He'll be doing the editing and all of that fun stuff. So Rourke and Ali, each of them, technical components to this trio of fun, I guess you can say. And I'm the guy that just asked, and I'm the guy that just asked the questions that most people would have about biotech. So today we're just going to be talking about the timeline of medicine. How did medicine transform from the Stone Age to the medieval age to the age that we're in now? And where are we going? So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start off with the medicine 1.0. So for those of you who don't know, medicine is kind of in stage 3.0 right now. And your question is probably, well, what is 1.0 and 2.0? Is there a 2.2? Is there a 2.5? We're going to go through all of that today. But today, let's just start off with medicine 1.0 and let's have some fun with this, guys. So which one of you, I know you're eager to kind of define what medicine 1.0 is. And as you do that, just maybe give us, the pros and cons, what people were doing the best they could with what they had in the Stone Age and just the beginning of medicine in general. So whichever one of you wants to walk us through that, and I'll ask questions along the way.
Yeah, 1.0. I would argue even like Cameron, we're not even in 3.0 yet, right? We're like still in 2.0. But right, that doesn't mean anything to anyone yet. So it's just a way to think about the eras of medicine. Dr. Peter Attia is kind of the one championing this vision of these different medicines, right? And so medicine 1.0 was, kind of the Hippocratic approach, pre-scientific method where you had, your village that you lived in, say like 10,000 years ago. And you had, your local whatever, right? Doctor, witch doctor, voodoo-tician, that would, look at you, diagnose you, give you some leaves, some herbs, some, whatever they felt, they would help you based on their experiences that, showed relieved symptoms. So it was really based on, personal belief that they would diagnose and treat people with whatever ailments, right? We didn't really have a methodology, right? A protocol to follow to isolate the reasonings why people are sick. So that was kind of the era of medicine 1.0, which was, from time immemorial till, maybe the, 18th century, right? 19th century, even, late 1700s, early 1800s, when the Enlightenment age and then the Industrial Revolution came along, when we started, applying the scientific method to certain industries, right? So when we were able to take what the Enlightenment period did and apply it to human health, we could isolate certain illnesses, right? And kind of they talk about the epicenter or like the crescendo or like the main point. What would you like to say? What's the right word for this, right? Like the focal point, right, of medicine 2.0 was germ theory. This idea that specific, microorganisms that we couldn't see were the ones that were actually infecting us and causing these illnesses, right? So we could isolate the causes of diseases, right? And then we could figure out, okay, now we can test one variable, right? One thing to see if that thing, helps or hurts the symptoms. And then we could find, pharmaceuticals, which came upon, antibacterial medications, and then the whole pharmaceutical revolution that we've been kind of in for the last 100 years, let's say. Right. So I still argue that we're kind of in medicine 2.0. And honestly, it's been really a boon for society. It's not a bad thing, right? I mean, it's effectively, the average lifespan went from, 40 to 80, right? It doubled
Right.
because we, infused our medical protocols with the scientific method. So in order to address very acute situations, right? Like, broken bones, car crashes, heart attacks, hemorrhages, strokes. I mean, all the way up to the severe trauma responses that we see nowadays, where these ER facilities save lives, right? Because they have created and refined these protocols. So it's really good at addressing acute symptoms, disorders. But what
Yeah.
it's not good at, right, is like addressing like chronic diseases, things that take a long time to build, crescendo, and cause effect, right? But we can get into that. So that was kind of, my perspective of kind of the evolution from 1.0 to 2.0, which is kind of what we're in right now. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And currently, like, we're more focused on treating the symptoms rather than like solving the problem. And that's because not necessarily because that's what we want to do, but maybe it's because that's what the technology got us that far. It's time to get to the point where we can cut the problem itself and cure the problem itself, rather than just like take the medication to stop the symptoms. There's a lot of diseases right now. You know, for example, fibromyalgia. This I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but this certain disease, it attacks the nerves and the connections between the nerves. And the people who have it, they suffer from severe symptoms, and there is no cure to that disease. But what there is certain therapies to treat the symptoms. Now, those people will take anything to get the symptoms away. They don't even like at this point trying to solve the problem. They're trying just to um, cure the symptoms they're having, because they can't sleep. It's affecting their life, their work, everything. So that's something we got good at right now with the healthcare system, is finding a way to have some short-term relief. Is that healthy on the long term? It's a lot of these medications that we take, they affect the liver or the kidney because they're filtering all these toxins. So there's a lot of components that we're solving the bigger problem, which causes a small problem in that process. But this time you would take anything. And, an ultimate relief would be, stopping the problem itself and solving it. And going back to medicine 1.0 is, it's always interesting to see how we got here. A lot of time we think about all the inventions that we have. A lot of it's built on other old inventions that we don't understand. We just know how it works. We understand the principle, but how we got there is like just huge. So we can't even, discard or even like the old practices. We can't discard those because that's what got us to where we at right now. That will be more of a launch pad to the point where we can, cut the problem itself.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree, and that's kind of what Cameron was discussing earlier, right? It's like during these times pre-industrial revolution, like we didn't have these technologies, so we couldn't use these technologies to solve
Right.
these problems, right? So like we could only do what as best as we could with the tools we had.
Right. Yeah, and there's so much that we don't know. But before we start diving into 2 and 3, let's take a look at just number 1 for right now. So my question is, and I think a lot of people would have the same one, is, what illnesses did people have, and what was their method of treatment? And I have another question beyond that, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, I mean, we were speculating here. So, I mean, because I'm not an MD, so I can't address the history of illness and, what illness has plagued, people mostly, but right, we could speculate, right, that
From history and
infection, right, like
yeah.
infection was probably the biggest one, right, that killed people, right?
Yep.
Because we see with simply introducing penicillin, right, and antibacterial and washing our hands, right, and like, improving our hygiene, recognizing that there's these microbes and viruses that infect us and cause us to become ill. Once we could kind of like mitigate that, we doubled the lifespan of a human being, right? So, but we didn't have the microscope, right? We didn't have the ability to study or even to think like, oh, there's these things smaller than we can see everywhere, like literally all over our skin, all over like, and weird, this is kind of interesting thought experiment, right? So like we think of our skin, this is a little bit side point, like as the thing outside our body, right? But our skin includes, the epithelial tissue that goes into your mouth, down your throat, right, into your stomach, down your bowels, right, and out your anus, right? So we're really just like this big, like long, elongated donut, if you think, like when we just, this is something I was really thinking about lately, like eating, like when you eat, all you're doing is you're taking like chunks of matter from earth and like scraping it against the side of your skin, like down your throat and in your stomach. And then your body's just like absorbing the food, but you're just like, the food just like pressing against the skin and you're just like absorbing it, right? It's like,
So,
Yeah.
so that's
quite a
something
weird-
that we didn't know in medicine 1.0 era.
I mean, we probably did. I mean, I'm just saying that's just a weird perspective, right? Without like
How did we
holding
get
tight
here?
to 1.0,
I know.
2.0.
I'm-
Like, think about it. Like, think about how weird that is. Like, you take a food and you think like, oh, once it goes in your mouth, it's inside your body, but it's not
Yeah.
inside your body. It's still outside of your body. It's just your body is like this weird, like, I don't know, donut-esque like thing where there's a big pipe down the middle, right? And then there's this thing that like surrounds the outside of that pipe, and you like smash food down there, and like the food like rubs against the outside of the pipe or the inside of the pipe, and then it somehow gets absorbed into your body, right? Like when it's in your stomach, it's not inside you yet. Like it's still out. That's still considered outside of your body. I mean, I was thinking about it actually. I mean, okay, I was thinking about how incredible it is. How incredible it is. The human body and all organisms. We like take earth and matter, and we just
Because
rub it against
we're
ourselves,
created
we
from
absorb
Earth.
it.
We're created from it.
And we take earth or things inside the environment and we just smash it against the side of us and we absorb it and it becomes a part of us and we exist.
And then when you die, you give it back to the earth.
Right? Isn't that it's incredibly insane to
Crazy.
think about that?
Yeah,
Like to have that
is.
perspective, because you're like, oh, I'm human, I eat food at the grocery store, and when I put it in my mouth, it's inside my body, but it's not inside your body. It's getting smashed up back to the side of your endothelial cells, right, in your GI tract as it goes down into your small intestines past your stomach, and then it's like the acids and there's like a trillion different bacterial cells or bacterial organisms in and around your skin, right? Like, so like inside your stomach, there's an equal amount of bacterial cells, like bacterial entities, as there are human cells. So we're like literally our microbiome, right?
They're beneficial. They're beneficial bacteria. They're good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's symbiotic, right? Like we eat food and they digest it for us, right? It goes through them first, and then their byproducts we absorb into our bloodstream, right? And like actually most of a large percentage of your serotonin, right, is synthesized in your stomach, right?
Let's back up.
Right, is tied to like the idea of like depression and or like non-depression stability, right? So like SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake
Define
inhibitors.
serotonin.
Well, serotonin is a neurotransmitter, right? So it is a molecule that is, I don't want to get into the specifics of what it does, but it provides stability of emotion and a lot of other things and neurochemical balance in your brain and around your body, right?
Is it?
And there's still a lot that we don't know about the full functionality of serotonin, but what we recognized is that we could give somebody a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which, without getting too deep into the neuromechanisms, it just like stops. So like, okay, so you have a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, right? That's how the two brain cells communicate with each other, right? And like the presynaptic neuron will like poop out like some neurochemicals, which in this thing called the synapse, and it will travel through this fluid to your postsynaptic neuron, and it will bind to that and will cause usually
Stimulation.
influx of, ions, which, allows an action potential, right? But
Yep.
there's just this communication between the two, and between the two pre and post synapses is like this communication of neurotransmitters, right? And so when serotonin's released from the pre to the post, it binds, it does something, and then it's recycled back into the presynaptic neuron, right? But if you block the presynaptic neuron from reuptaking that serotonin, then it stays in the synapse. So it has longer effect on the postsynaptic neuron, right? So that's the idea with SSRIs is that you can have serotonin stay longer in that synapse so it can have a longer effect. But we didn't know what serotonin did. We just recognized, hey, this molecule does this action, and it has and honestly, the pharmaceutical industry is like, let's just find some ailment that this helps, right? And mental disorder. And it does, SSRIs do help, right, with depression, and it's variable between people.
What is SSRI? I got cut off.
Sorry. I was moving fast because we were talking about neuroscience. Okay,
No,
so
go ahead.
SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, right? So selective means that serotonin, so there's these receptors on the presynaptic neuron that reuptake serotonin, that they take the serotonin from the synapse, right? The fluid between two neurons, the synaptic junction, and they absorb it back into the presynapse, the presynaptic neuron, to then reuse, right? But if you inhibit, right, you don't allow that receptor channel, which is just like a tunnel that pulls molecules into the cell. If you don't allow that channel to reabsorb the serotonin, then it stays in the synapse for a longer period of time. So therefore, it can have action on the postsynaptic cell for longer, right? So it's the idea that if you don't have enough, you're not synthesizing enough serotonin, right? Or there's some mechanism along the line that, your serotonin functionality is not working appropriately, you tend to have depressive symptoms, right? So that's.
Would they claim that depression is a blockage of serotonin or just a malfunction of the serotonin cyclical process?
They don't know. They don't know. We don't know about depression. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Like they found this pharmaceutical that does this action on a molecular level. And they're like, okay, great. It's not like endangering the species. How can we like package this and sell it? Well, it looks like we could frame it to be a antidepressant, right?
You know what's amazing about the body that I've learned is everything happens in cycles. There's an action, there's a reaction, and your body has its own amazing way of getting itself back to normal, so to speak, or getting itself back to a place where it needs to be. Because your body's whole, I guess, purpose is just to
feedback
survive.
mechanism.
Right. It's right. The whole thing is just a defense mechanism. It's like, hey, idiot, we're trying to keep you alive. So if you don't exercise enough, if you eat the wrong things, if you don't heal a wound, if for whatever reason you start getting depressed, you find yourself in a dark room too much, like your body has reactions to all of those things. And it may be very painful for you, but like it's actually keeping you alive. I thought that was pretty amazing. Would you say, like, where would you say between medicine 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, like, where did we come up with that realization that your body is really just a machine that happens in cycles that just keeps us alive?
Yeah, I'm gonna
For
jump
lack
in
of better
first.
words. Yeah, go
Do
ahead.
it.
No, I want to go back a little bit. what I said actually was feedback mechanism. So
Yeah.
most of the systems are positive feedback or negative feedback. Mostly it's negative feedback. Um, but I want to go back before we jump into that point is there any correlation between dopamine and serotonin?
Yeah, two neurotransmitters. I mean, correlation. I don't know what do you mean by that?
I think I don't know if I was correct, but that's correct. But I don't remember what I was watching, but I heard like serotonin and dopamine are kind of like somewhat the same. Like when you go on dopamine depletion or all these kind of like dopamine levels, serotonin is kind of like supplemental, or in a way it's behaves the same way as a dopamine. That's maybe the depression part of the equation is connected with dopamine.
Yeah, I mean it's really complex when you get into these conversations about like, because you can't, so I mean dopamine really is involved with reward signaling. Like when you do something beneficial, right, it signals you to learn that that thing is beneficial for you, or pleasurable, right? Serotonin's a little bit more aloof, right? A little bit more ubiquitous, right? And it has a lot of functionality outside of the brain too. But there is a lot of crossover between the neuroanatomical systems influenced by dopamine and serotonin, right? Like they generate from different regions. But like where they have impact and effect on, you'll find a lot of, serotonin receptors, concurrent, on the same neuron as where you'll find, dopamine receptors. But like when we get really into it, I mean, it's like fantastically complex, a brain, because not only like, I mean, honestly, you could like analogize that each neuron itself is almost like a computer in a way, right? Like, and we have 100 billion of those, computers connected with each other. And, it's funny, kind of like tying it back to AI, they always make the connection like, oh, there's, 500 billion parameters in Google's new AI model. It's like, oh, there's more parameters than there are neurons in the brain. Therefore, it's like smarter, right? But really what a parameter is
A limit, so to speak.
Yeah. So specifically in neural networks, right, there's weights and biases, right? The weights are the connections between artificial neurons, right? So you can like add up the number of parameters, which kind of tell you how big the model is, the artificial neural network. But so we're talking about connections between neurons, right? So there's 500 billion connections between neurons. That's how big these are, the biggest artificial intelligent models are. But do you know how many connections there are in the brain, the human brain?
Got to be like trillions, right?
Right. So on average, there's about 1,000 axonal or dendritic connections. So there's an axon that projects out, and each neuron has about 1,000 dendrite connections. So each neuron is effectively connected to 1,000 different neurons, and there's 100 billion neurons, right? On estimation, on average. So that's 100 trillion connections, right? And see, that's the thing, is like, we're talking about pyramidal cells. So like, as you see here, right, all this cortex up here and like a little bit in here, right? That's all pyramidal cells. That's, our neocortex, right? But if you look over, you can't really see it, but this is the hippocampus. No, sorry. Gosh, I'm blanking on my neuroanatomy. Neurons in the cerebellum, right? On average have 100,000 connections. Think about that. Like most of the the neocortex, right? The most recently evolved layer of the brain, pyramidal cells is the definition of or what the cell is. It's called a pyramidal cell because it looks kind of like a pyramid. It has about 1,000 connections, dendritic connections, but the cerebellum can't recall what the cell type is because I couldn't even recall the neuroanatomy, but has about 100,000 connections, right? And it's kind of thought to be associated with like equilibrium, or ability to like kind of like connect our ability to circumnavigate and our locomotion in, you know, three-dimensional space, right? And time. It's supposed to kind of be the orienting center for that. Where, like I said, like all the movements and, you know, your perception and orientation and being able to like, you know, just non-consciously navigate and circumnavigate through reality is like conducted in that area, right? So it kind of makes sense why it has to have the highest density of dendritic connections, but 100,000, right? And there's, you know, probably 100 million to a few billion of those neurons, which, right? So there's hundreds of trillions of connections, which means there's hundreds of trillions of parameters in a human brain. So like the number of connections really isn't there yet between AI models and the human brain. Plus, what's kind of another interesting point is like those models that we talk about, they're in one data center that's the size of a building, right? So the brain of ChatGPT is about the size of a building, right? And several tons, right? And the human brain is, you know, a couple pounds, right? Stored here, and we can, you know, navigate with it. So there's still a lot that can be done.
Improved.
I mean, it's just it's an interesting perspective. I mean, there's of course you can make arguments of like, well, you can, you know, translocate. You could send that intelligence out, you know, to your server, through your server, and like now it's like you can interface with it.
All right, yeah, let's go ahead.
All right, I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah,
Okay, we went on a
yeah, I was
wormhole.
like,
Did we
all
learn something? Did we enjoy that? Was that
Yeah,
too
it
much?
was good. No, Ali, I don't know why you asked that question right there, right before. I don't even remember what my question was.
So
that
you were
what he
talking
just-
about,
I
what
remember.
we just went through,
it.
that's its whole other episode. That's a
I-
whole episode on its own.
I
I don't even
remember, but
remember what my
because
question was.
you asked your question right when I wanted to ask about that and move on, and then I was
There's
like,
so many questions when we do these things that I don't get to ask because you guys just keep going off.
all right,
hey, well, that's why we take clips. You know, you'll ask like something will go on, and then, but you went back, you were talking about
the
medicine
turning point.
1.0.
Yeah. And when did we get to know germ theory and understand other, like, he asked about the
Well, that's what it was. It was, when
yeah.
did we understand that the whole body was just one big feedback system? It was a equilibrium finding, problem mitigating machine.
Well, and I had an interesting, so we've always analogized with like the tools we used, you know, like the brain was like, you know, the fire, right? And then, you know, when the steam engine was developed, right, during the Industrial Revolution, it was like, okay, well, the brain and the body, like the human body, kind of operate like a steam engine, right? Where like there's some sort of locomotion and some internal energy source that provides, you know, the ether for our ability to think. And then it went to the computer, right? So we've always analogized like how our body works based on, you know, the most advanced tooling systems. So I would say, you know, we started to realize this feedback system. I mean, we probably did it. We knew it from, you know, the time we started, you know, language, right? I mean, like to recognize that you could burn yourself on fire. You didn't like that. You moved your hand away, and your skin was like, you know, created these blisters of plasma, and then they would go away, and then the pain would go away, right? Like this idea that there was this equilibrium state that we were always trying to go towards. So I would argue we've always known that, you know, we didn't know how to analogize it, to paint it to other people, to pass that image down to the next generation. And that's why we've always analogized it to whatever modern tool we've been creating.
Gotcha.
What do you think of that?
No, I think his second part of the question was, when did we start knowing like the microorganisms and, you know, washing your hands, or, you know, going from medicine 1.0 to medicine 2.0, and, you know, going into the germ theory aspect. I think maybe one of the focal points or turning points was, I don't recall exactly like the details, but there's a like when there was a, you know, an infectious disease and doctors were treating people, and they would go to the next room without washing their hands and be like, why everybody's getting infected? At some point, when they start washing their hands, the doctors start washing their hands. Oh, the infection is like the number of cases going down. So I think
Yeah.
this kind of event was maybe a turning point.
Did
Yeah.
you know that the doctor that came up with that, not the theory, but just the discovery of washing your hands, that they were like, they lost their medical license. They were just like barred from the association. They were I don't know what the word is, but they were just like cast out because it was such a ridiculous idea. Did you know that?
No, I didn't, but I believe it. I mean, that reminds me of a passage, and I'm not going to be able to recall it because it's actually like a long, monologue in Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, where the protagonist at the end is on trial for his anti-socialism because he just is trying to create. He's an architect. He's he has this ability to see landscape and cultivate buildings based on the specific characteristics of the landscape, right? Whereas back then they're like, oh, it's got to be a whatever, like a Romanesque style or romantic style, or like whatever era of the time of artistic. They were just replicating different architectural styles and like putting them all together to write like a Tudor house, right? Like whatever different designs of houses. You learned architecture based on like the past, how the masters of the past created their house, and you just kind of like mixed and matched whatever different art styles of the past to create whatever house you were. But he like saw the land and built the house around the land, right? And it was totally unique, right? And they all whatever, and it was a fantastic book, right? And it was just, no, you can't, nobody could do that. They couldn't envision that. They didn't have the ability or the capability to build like he or see like he. And and they ridiculed him, and they tried always to bring like to kill him, not like physically, but to like kill his career, kill his name. And he didn't care. He didn't pay them any mind. It didn't matter to him. All he did is he just continued working and producing and doing. And he talked about, he's like, he kept throughout the whole book, he's wondering like, why this mentality, where does this mentality comes from? And he goes on this dialogue talking about like, the first person to build fire, they burned them at the stake, right? First person to bring the villagers like, hey, we can make fire and, improve our lives. They burned him at the stake. And the first person to show them how to build a wheel, they pulled his body apart on a stretcher rack, right? And he like went around and like the first innovation that somebody brought to mankind, they saw it as like, what's the right word for it? Like blasphemous, right?
Blasphemy, yeah.
And so he was put to death, right? Or whatever. But then, society evolved from it because of it. And you see that a lot, really, when something transformational comes along, it's almost never just like, oh, let's accept it, right? There's always some pushback.
I think it's because I was thinking about this today. It's because their pride is attacked. They get offended. They're just,
and it forces change, and people don't like
right. It forces you out of your comfort zone. It attacks your pride. And I was thinking about that today. The only reason that you could be offended is by some form of truth. Because if someone called me short, I'm not short. I'm above average in height. Like that's not going to hurt me. It's okay. Doesn't really offend me.
This goes back to another deep, I shouldn't say deep, but like something I've meditated on, right? Like what's the root of suffering, right? Like where does especially mental suffering, like where does that arise from? And I think it really arises from like our innate factor to have expectation. Because if we're like, if we have some process in our mind and we have some expectation on like how our environment should, mitigate to that expectation, and it doesn't align with it, then it causes this like fission and, mental stress, right? That then can come to anger or whatever, right? And then denial if you don't want to believe facts delivered to you because it doesn't match your expectation.
Exactly.
And it's different. right? It's different from like having the you think of like I expect something to happen, like I want you to do this, but like inherent expectation, because we're like an organism that's always taking information and trying to like project into the future so that we can navigate, right? And that's kind of like what humans are and do. So it's like inherent for us to kind of project subtly into the future with these expectations of how things should arise, and when they don't arise that way, then that's what causes this mental suffering, right? And of course, we suffer more in the mind than we do in actual physical reality.
Right. In your head, you're dead, but your
In
mind
your
is
head, you're
just,
dead.
yeah, right. And your mind is like the epicenter. And you made a point. There's like hundreds of trillions of parameters. And I'm just curious, like there's so much of the brain that we don't know. And of those 100 trillion, like there's absolutely no way in 100 or 1,000 lifetimes that the biggest team of researchers could go and analyze each one of those parameters, each one of those connections, see exactly what each one of those do. Is there like a percentage of the brain that we actually know about? Is like, do we even have a clue?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do. We have a very good understanding of the molecular and cellular biology of neurons, right? Like from studying animals, but and then we have like on the other end, we have a pretty good understanding of psychology, right? And then we're kind of like starting to map psychology and like fMRI, or these other neuroimaging techniques and pairing them with psychological protocols. So like we're starting kind of like map psychology in the brain together. So like on one end we have probably like 5% understanding, and then the other end we probably have like 10 or 15%. But like, what does that mean? So 25, so 75% of the brain is like unknown, because we don't have the ability to navigate that space without either causing damage, right? Or, we don't have it yet. And I think when brain computer interfaces come on, or brain machine interfaces, that's going to be really the next evolution of neuroimaging techniques that will like allow us in real time to act and record.
So you brought up another good question. So I'm thinking about in terms of what we didn't know, and we always progress in terms of kind of what we do know and what we're comfortable around. So let's just say that medicine 3.0 is neurocentric. Is there something in medicine 1.0, like maybe, I don't know, let's just say, for example, it was the skin, because that's the outermost layer. That's something that's most obvious. If you get cut, we're going to study the skin. In medicine 2.0, it's germs and bacteria. Let's just say maybe it's the blood. I don't know. But is there something that's centric? Is it cytocentric? Is it neurocentric? Where were we in each stage? And in the next phase in biosensing, which I believe that we're going to, is that a neurocentric thing?
Well, I don't want to generalize this 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, because like it wasn't really centric. Like it's very just an analogy to think about,
The
like,
approach taken.
yeah, right. Like the protocols done by people practicing medicine, not like healthcare in general, like not human health. Like the people practicing medicine in that 1.0 era was like, the witch doctor, that they only had their personal beliefs. They gave them some herb they created and whatever, made up some reason why this works. Medicine 2.0 was the doctor treating based on scientific research, right? Done by and with the scientific method, through clinical trials or population trials or whatever, right? 3.0 is this idea that we can actually use like big data, right? Like if we get bio wearables, right? If we get biosensors that are continuously monitoring, or if we have a lot of point of care testing, or we have an ability to better manage and track electronic health records, where we can like, perform analytics on it for each person, then like we can start to have large databases of people's like health metrics, and we could analyze that, and then in turn help them be more healthy, right? And so 2.0 was this idea, like still like this reactive diagnostics. You wait to get sick Then you have to go find out why you're sick from the doctor. And the doctor had a good, tools to figure out why you were sick, right, through the scientific method, right? But you still waited to get sick, and then you went and tried to figure out why you're sick, and then you tried to get better by taking pharmaceuticals or whatever, right? But like 3.0 is the idea is that like if we are proactively monitoring and acquisitioning or accumulating this data, then we could like proactively benefit or help the people, the patients, without having them wait to get sick, kind of thing, right? So it's like what was the statement that Peter Attia I don't want to go in, but if that makes sense. So like it's not centric at all, but I do believe one of the frontiers is the brain that is unexplored. And I think I had a crazy epiphany the other day. It was like, I called it a micro epiphany, with that Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg. Did anybody watch that?
No, I have it on my watch list.
It's good.
This one and the Sam Altman one.
Sam Altman one's pretty good too. Did you watch the Matthew McConaughey one?
No, I saw his post on LinkedIn with the cowboy hat.
Yeah, I saw you saw that. Yeah. I watched it yesterday. It was really good. That one's the first like 20 minutes, like they're kind of getting comfortable with each other, but the last 2 hours are just magic. They're great.
It's funny how with Lex, like the last 7 hours is good.
Right.
Is this like a series or something, or is this like a?
Oh, you gotta look up Lex Friedman. He's a podcaster.
Oh, so Lex Friedman.
Yeah, Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman podcast. He like interviews people, but it's like, people there are very interesting.
He's a researcher. So he focuses on
he got his PhD in computer science from Drexel, and then he got his did his postdoc at MIT. I don't know how much he's doing currently, but he's big thing in podcasting for sure.
Yeah, he's posting about how he has a goal of starting a company
or joining one, and I was like,
joining one by the end of the year. Dude, we could. Him.
So that's what I was talking about. Okay, so with Mark Zuckerberg, they're talking about, okay, where is AI going to go, right? And Mark was like, Google and OpenAI, like they're building this like mono system where there's one AI to rule them all, right? One AI that just, you interface with. And he's like, what I would rather have is have like, 1,000, 100,000 different AIs for different tasks. And then Lex brought up the point, it's like, yeah, it would be great if I could have my personal AI system that's trained on edge computing, right? So it's trained on the edge, not in a central location. That's like a personal AI. That's like an AI Lex, right? Where it's like, it's my AI. So like whenever I'm interfacing, it would write emails for me. Like it could even talk to fans or whoever, or like be my assistant, right? Create my schedule, like talk to people for me, schedule things for me, right? And then like set things up for me. Like it would be the interface between me and the public and everyone else, right? And of course, it's not always like, it's not a gatekeeper.
Bro, I did
hell. Ali says I got workers jumping in my balcony. Okay.
Bro, they're down there. So
well, it's blurred, but I can kind of see somebody moving back there.
This dude just jumped in here.
What the heck?
I didn't want you to stop, Doc.
I couldn't help it. I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
Why did you?
Well, anyway, I mean, I can jump right back into it. No, I mean, but that was funny. I wish you would have had it like not blurred, and then we would have like seen him like Fred over there cleaning windows.
He's close. He's right here. He's gonna did say hi.
Yo, Fred.
All
right, but back, no, what I was saying though, right? Like, so like thinking about this, right? So I was like, okay, so you have now, let's say, then this is what I think too, right? Like, let's have 100,000 more. Everyone has their personal AI that's trained on their phone or like on the edge, that's like trained to their data, that is effectively your digital self, right? Not like some mono AI that's like our God, right? Like that's our like digital God. We talk to ChatGPT or Bart, like praise them. They have all the answers. No, I'd rather have a personal AI that I could communicate with. It's not hyper genius, but it like can like do a lot of things for me, right? And like whatever, be my friend.
It knows what you're looking for, so it's
Oh,
kind of
does it?
primed. It's always primed.
Right.
You don't have to
Yeah.
prime it like we do, you know.
Right.
You gotta like have it a
Right. Well,
system.
and so
Does
I was
it-
like,
So it like learns your schedule. It learns what you
Maybe
do,
your
and it's
belief
just like-
system. I don't know. Can you
yeah,
like train
it
it
would
to
be a
have your
digital
own
self of
principles?
yours. It
Yeah.
would be your digital self, and it would like sound like you, talk like you, have, you know, what is it called? Like speech. I don't. It's not aneurysm. What am I thinking that? What the heck?
This guy literally jumped. I was like, yo. Anyway.
What's it called? You know, like certain like speech patterns, mannerisms. That's what they're called. So it would have like your mannerisms, right? It would be you. Like everyone that communicates with it would know it's pretty much you, right? And you would know you're interfacing probably with the AI system, but it's like a part of you. It's an extension of you, right? But it's not like a centralized deity that we go to.
But is that, well, when you say that, I mean, doesn't it limit your abilities? Meaning, so you need a challenging opinion or like some kind of a parallel or you know, a counterpart. You don't want a duplicate of yourself. You know, I think given it like some principles that you don't want to be crossed while, you know, giving you, you know, the information that you need, and prime it that way to understand your industry or what's your focus in is. But you know, I don't think having it have the same mannerism as you is actually powerful. I think it should be more of a, you know, a different perspective.
Mhm.
So I don't
Yeah, well, I
know.
guess it depends on which way it's facing, right? Like if it's facing you, you don't want it to be just exactly like you, right? You want something new, right, to engage and to grow from. But if it's facing outward and acting as your, you know, at your capacity, like, you know, as your agent, you want it to be, you know, representing your principles and your, even like how you would interface with people. So it would, you know, most accurately be able to be your agent, right?
Got it.
But the thing I was thinking, right, is the next step. Because like, gosh, the last few weeks I've been all over the place on where the future is going, because I don't want to go too far down a tangent. So let me just finish this tangent. Okay, so I feel that the next step of evolution should include humanity, right? I feel that should be the case, right? I think we should be a part of that next step. I think there's a question, and we're going to bifurcate in one direction where we actually integrate. If we don't completely destroy everything, that's a different thing. But like if we keep going down this timeline into the future, so like we have to integrate with technology and evolve, right, to what my opinion is to move on, to go onto the stars, to travel more, right, across the universe. The other bifurcated path is to develop the next phase of evolution, which is develop the next organism and entity that then is capable of hyperintelligence and is capable of traveling the universe because it's artificial. It is not tied to a terrestrial planet, right? We are terrestrial organisms that have evolved for 4 billion years on Earth. So how do you just transplant an organism that's evolved on a terrestrial body to a new body, right? Like you said last time, Ali, you either engineer the human or the organism, or you engineer, you know, you do terrestrial engineering, right? Terraforming, one of the two. Both are really hard, right?
Yeah.
Terrestrial engineering takes thousands of years, millions of years maybe to do, right? Really, unless you had some crazy way to accelerate that. But bioengineering seems like kind of the more suitable case, but like that's really complicated too, and that's a lot of questions. So it's like integrating, but like, I mean, a lot of people are like, I think we need to be humble and recognize ourselves as these barely out of the woods creatures that is only here to cross the bridge from the woods to the next evolution. And like, we're only here to build that next thing and then let go. Right. And we have to be able to have, you know, sympathy that like we will be embedding our values and principles into the next thing, which is, these artificial systems, like they are trained on human data, they'll accelerate past it, but they'll have some trace of humanity in them. And so we can be, humbled by that, or we can appreciate that, exalted by it, right? But like, it's not going to be human. So that's like the big debate, right? Like, okay, maybe we're just here to create this thing, to go on to be, whatever the next thing is, right? And like that was the conversation with Matthew McConaughey and Lex, that like that's what kind of like instilled in me, is like maybe we are only here to build the next thing, even though like at my core I want selfishly humanity to be a part of the next evolution, right? But like, I mean, I don't know. So that's just definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
But if we are, so going before the latter statement, if we have these decentralized, personalized AI systems that are trained on the edge, that interface between us and the public, then the next step, right, is, in my opinion, is brain-computer interfaces, integrating technology with us and having the brain connected to every other brain, right? But it interfaces through the AI system. So you're not just like constantly, I mean, it's tricky, but I think the next evolution, if we want to go down the bifurcated path, down the path that is integrating technology and bringing humanity along for the ride, we need to have decentralized AI. If we want to go the creation of the next thing, then it's going to be centralized AI. And we'll see how it happens in the next 15 years. Like we'll be witnessing what will happen to the future of life, right? Whether it's artificial or still continues to be biological.
I think maybe it will. I mean, if you're creating life, it's most likely going to be like a biological, like to
It
have
doesn't have
some
to
kind.
be, right?
Because
I mean,
what if
all life is ordered
if
systems.
what if all the infrastructure just disappears? You know, for all these devices to work,
Mm-hmm.
humans will still be able to survive and be humans.
Well, I mean, I think, I think humans would die. I think life might continue on, right? But I mean, humans could easily die off. Let's say, honestly, let's say all things just shut off. Let's say there was a nuclear war and all things shut off, right? Most of humanity would starve to death. Like the crops would be wiped out by ash clouds, right? The supply chain would be wiped. People don't know how to survive on their own, especially in developed countries. Like you look around here, like at the grocery stores and everything went empty, they wouldn't know how to like prepare for winter without
Yeah,
food. Like they'd be,
but humans they'll find a way.
I think you're
That's
right.
I mean
Could.
I think with humans, needs is the kind of the birthplace for solutions, you know?
Yeah. Innovation. And I
The
totally agree
innovation
with
is
you
like
there.
it's like, yeah, but who has a higher chance of survival? An AI that you just cut the cord on it, or a human who has, 7 days, I don't know, 7 days without water, few weeks without food,
Hmm.
to survive, rather than just
Yeah.
cut
And
the
we're,
cord.
and we're talking about like right now, right? Like if we cut the cord on AI, like, yeah, we would survive. We have a better chance of surviving. But like in 30 years from now, like if we integrate whatever technology into everybody's life, and we don't know, like that's the thing, right? We like talk about, oh, what would happen if, AI became smarter than the smartest humans? It's like, well, that's called a singularity. And what is a singularity? It's something we don't know on the other side of. By
Yeah.
definition, we can't know what happens. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where it progresses. I mean, I have to hold strong. And actually, I was watching an interview with Elon. I don't know. I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about kind of this conversation, like, are we building, this next, the descendants of man, which is artificial intelligence, or like, are we going to be evolving with it? And he's all about, right, us evolving along, like us going along with the ride. But he's like, I sometimes I question, like, if that's the case, why am I doing all this? What's, you can kind of see sadness in his eyes, which was, what it is. But I also fundamentally believe, like, and maybe it's a selfish belief or not, I don't know yet, but like, we should want to go into the future with evolution, I mean, and I think it's
Yeah,
cool. I don't see why it's not. you
And
know?
I think if AI, if you think about it, if AI is stronger, it's smarter than us, then it's most likely gonna give us solutions or ways to evolve with it.
Right.
We'll utilize and we'll leverage it. So maybe the idea or the execution of evolving with it might not be started by a man, but it will provide that for us.
Right. And it's interesting I do recommend watching that interview with Matthew Kennedy. It's great. But they were talking about, it's like Matthew was like testing it out, trying it out. It's like, it's funny. I kept asking questions about all these different things, and like whatever. I can't remember what he was specifically talking about, but he was like, what it kept coming back to me, what it kept answering in its final conclusion is like, well, it all depends on what you want me to be for you. Right. Like it always came back to like, whatever you want me to be for you, I will be for you. So prompt me that way. Right. Engineer me to be that thing. And so it's not like it will just like have sentience and kill all humanity. Humanity will leverage it in an evil way to do bad things, and we will leverage it in a good way to do good things. And I think you're totally right with the idea that like we will leverage it as it grows in intelligence to help us also move along with it, and I think that's where it comes into play, like building new and better technologies. I mean, we're already utilizing AI to build better technology companies, right? And it's only going to be accelerated. So, well, we lost Cameron. He just dipped like I don't know, call him a greenhorn. He couldn't hang.
He's busy. He has another meeting.
He's too cool for school, I guess. But
yeah,
so we didn't we had a good convo. We talked about a little bit about 1, 2, 3, but honestly, I like just going off on tangents more. I think that's where the interesting conversation goes. The nuance. So with that, I guess we'll call it, and we'll see y'all next time.
See you.
Yeah, and there's a few people talking about it,